Hello and welcome to Follow the Money. I am Su Jin Kim. Join us as we explore the tools and insights you need to jumpstart your financial journey. Over 1 million jobs were lost in March. We have this report. The Philippine labor market suffered a major setback in March, with the total number of employed persons plunging by 1.13 million, marking one of the largest month-on-month job losses in recent years. This drastic drop comes amid the combined impact of seasonal employment adjustments, the ongoing impact of global economic headwinds, and the 2025 midterm election hiring ban, which froze recruitment for many government and public sector roles. Meanwhile, underemployment, or the number of workers seeking additional hours or additional jobs, surged by 1.48 million. This pushed the underemployment rate to 13.4%, its highest level since the pandemic, reflecting deepening job quality issues. The worst job losses were recorded in key sectors such as wholesale and retail trade, agriculture, construction, and manufacturing. These industries, which together form the backbone of the Philippine economy, have been hit hard by weak consumer demand, rising input costs, and supply chain disruptions. The impact was also felt across specific occupational groups, with elementary occupations losing 134,000 jobs. Service and sales workers also shed 123,000 positions, indicating a broad-based decline in employment opportunities. The overall size of the labor force also contracted, with the participation rate slipping to 62.9%, down from 64.5% in February, as many workers either exited the job market or delayed job searches due to schooling, family responsibilities, or low-wage prospects. What do the numbers say about the real state of work in the country? To put the numbers in perspective, we have the Secretary General of the Sentro ng mga Nagkakaisa at Progresibong Manggagawa, Mr. Joshua Mata. Pleasure to have you on the show, Joshua. Let's get started. Joshua, the March labor force survey showed a massive drop in employment, with over 1 million jobs lost in just 1 month, one of the sharpest declines recorded. What does this sudden plunge in numbers indicate about the health of the labor market?
Hello, Su Jin, and hello to you and to you right now. Well, to be honest, this is something that has been going on for quite some time now. What you're seeing is actually the persistent pattern of the mediocre job creation that the country has been experiencing for quite some time now. And what the report did not show is the fact that not only is the jobs generation drastically declined, but the quality of jobs continues to be really bad. And also the fact that there's a stark gap in the labor participation between men and women. So these are patterns that we have been seeing again and again. And I really think that this will not change until the government changes its policies with regards to jobs generation.
You talked a bit on the labor force participation rate falling to 62.9% in March from 64.5% in February. This is a significant drop in just 1 month. What do you think is driving this decline, and how concerned should we be about it?
Well, I think we should all be concerned, primarily if you look at the fact that if you parse the data, you will see that actually the labor participation in men is at 73%, while that of women is only at 52%. So for our women, for the women in the labor force, that is something that's a concern that we really should try and address very, very quickly. So that's a problem. But importantly, it tells us that for many people, the possibility of actually job has been discouraging them. They know that there is not available job. They know that the jobs available may not be of the kind of quality of jobs that they seek, and therefore many seek not to participate in the labor force. So that's an indication that our economy is not generating the jobs needed by our people.
So talking about the quality of jobs, we necessarily have to talk about underemployment. Underemployment, which reflects the number of workers seeking additional hours or better jobs, surged by 1.48 million in March, reaching 13.4% from somewhere around 10% last February. What does this reveal about the quality of jobs in the country, and why do you think underemployment is such a persistent issue?
Again, this is a consistent pattern, no? And the reason is because I think the government is really failing to come up with better policies that would ensure that they can generate the kind of jobs that we want, particularly those in the manufacturing, which would provide a much better quality job. But it's also because the government has been avoiding addressing a the very big problem of contractualization that we have been experiencing in the country for many, many years now. And the fact that the Congress, the 19th Congress, which is about to end, does not even did not even give enough time to have a discussion the security of tenure bill. It's an indication that the government is not serious about trying to address the quality of jobs. So as long as the government continues to believe the jobs generation is something that has to be depended on, that has to be left to the hands of the private sector, I think we will always have this kind of persistent problems.
And then you mentioned the sectors that suffered the most job losses this month or last March. Agriculture and forestry turned out to be one of those. Traditionally, it's a pillar of the Philippine economy. It also suffered a major setback, losing 473,000 jobs. What do you think are the structural issues facing this sector, and what can be done to stabilize rural employment?
Well, the crisis in agriculture has been going on for quite some time now. Not only because of the climate change, but it's exacerbated. The problem is exacerbated by the fact that our government has been very lax in protecting our agriculture, and in its knee-jerk response to import massive amounts of foodstuff in order to address the inflation that many people have been experiencing, is also hurting our agricultural sector. And more importantly, if you will notice, the government has hardly been investing in agriculture. And that's the reason why you will always continue to see, we will always see the pattern that agriculture will be losing out. But I'm also, we should not only be concerned about the loss of jobs in agriculture. The loss of jobs in manufacturing, which has been happening for several months now, is an indication that the industrialization continues to happen, and that is something that we should all be very concerned about, because it means that the dream of industrialization is being put back for the future, rather than have it realized today.
I was looking at the figures in manufacturing jobs. We know this is crucial for exports and industrial growth. It also shed around 265,000 jobs in March. How much of this decline do you think is due to automation and digital transformation? And how should the industry adapt to this?
I'm not so sure if the data would show that this is about automation at this point in time. To be honest, I tend not to believe in that, because capital in this country is very expensive. So automation, which is a problem, is going to be a problem if done improperly, would eventually be a problem for us. But I don't think that's the case at this point in time. I think what we're seeing is the fact that we have been so dependent on low level manufacturing is being disrupted by the trade tantrums of Mr. Trump. Then obviously that is already. I think that what you're seeing is a possible early impact of the massive disruption that's happening now in global trade. So I don't think this is yet the problem of automation at this point in time. I think this has to do with the fact that, again, our manufacturing are not being competitive enough, and that is another reason why the recent figures in jobs generation should be a wake-up call for our government. Because to be honest, if we want to encourage more manufacturing in the country, we have to address fundamental problems that has been
that has been hindering us from being competitive. For example, electricity rates in the country continues to be one of the highest in the region, if not in the world. In most cases, you'll find that electricity rates in the country is like top five in the world at this point in time, and that's making our production much more expensive. You don't then you add the problem of transportation crisis, where logistical costs increases simply because we are losing so much time just traveling from one point to the other. These are problems that has not been addressed by our government, unfortunately. And now that you're seeing the decline in manufacturing, that should be a wake up call.
You talked about the electricity reforms needed to improve the manufacturing sector. Do you think the Create More Act helped aid this problem?
Um, I think I think it goes beyond that. No, I think what we need is a more comprehensive response. For example, with the current disruption in trade, that if Trump will continue with weaponizing tariff, I think we need to rethink our industrial strategy to the point that we really need to have a very clear industrial policy on how to protect which particular industries to protect and how to protect them is something that the government would really have to do. Now, again, this is something that the government has been trying to avoid. Any self-respecting government today would tend to create their own industrial policy, but not the Philippines. Second, we also need to make sure that if we have an industrial policy, it must be backed up by public investments, which again is something that the government has not been thinking of. And if you look at, for example, the current response of the government, they just rolled out Trabajo para sa Bayan program. If you look at it, that too falls short of what is really needed, no? Because it doesn't even mention public employment program. It doesn't mention industrial policy, and more importantly, it doesn't look at the deeper problems that's affecting manufacturing in our country that we mentioned earlier.
And then, other than the agriculture and manufacturing sectors, the wholesale and retail trade sector, one of the largest employers in the country, also lost close to 500,000 jobs in March, the biggest drop actually across all industries. What could be driving this decline, and how critical is this to the overall economy?
I think that's a function of the capacity of the of people to consume. No, and if workers continue to suffer from cost of living crisis, then obviously and because wages have yet to be increased, then obviously the automatic response of workers would be to try to save on their expenses and their expenditure, and that impacts on the consumption pattern. Now, and if you look back, in most cases, our economic development is primarily consumption driven. So again, we need to look at the wage structure of our country, and this is another reason why we are arguing that there is a need to adjust the minimum wage in a legislative manner, which the president unfortunately continues to ignore.
And then you also touched on Trump tariffs a while ago. With these latest job losses or are these latest job losses also an effect of these global headwinds, or how much have the global headwinds contributed to this job crisis that we're seeing right now?
Well, that's mentioned by the government during its press conference, but I think that we're only seeing at the beginning of the problem because, as you know, the Trump tariffs have been on hold for what 80 more days, if you like. It's been on hold for 90 days. Should be on hold for 90 days, and many countries are rushing to negotiate with the U.S., including the Philippines. And here's another matter that we should be we should be interested in looking at. We were informed through the media that the government has sent its delegation to Washington, D.C., and they're now negotiating with the USTR, that's the U.S. Trade Representative's Office. Question is, what is it that they're actually giving up? Now, if they are once again offering lower tariffs for U.S. products, then that is something that should be reviewed, and that is something that our Congress should look into, because it means it would once again impact the jobs generation. Can you imagine being flooded once again with more cheaper products from abroad? And that would make our industrial manufacturing sector uncompetitive.
Yes, right now we need to pause for a while, and when we return, is the government doing enough to promote decent work and job security? Keep it here on Follow the Money. You're watching Follow the Money. We're still with labor advocate Joshua Mata on the implications of the March labor force survey. So Joshua, do you expect unemployment to continue its upward trend?
No, not really. I think that first there's the problem of seasonality. So during summer, we would expect that employment would slow down, and it usually would pick up again towards the end of the year, when everyone is rushing to fill up the demand for the Christmas season.
And then last Monday, the government launched its Trabajo para sa Bayan program. Why do you think
That's
this
right.
won't necessarily help reduce unemployment figures?
Well, because as I said, the Trabajo para sa Bayan program falls short of what is needed to be done to jumpstart the jobs generation in the country. As I mentioned earlier, the government continues to believe that that the jobs generation is something that should be left to the hands of the private sector. The problem is that has been happening for many decades now, and as you can see, the private sector is not able to generate enough jobs, particularly quality jobs that we all need. Government has to step in. It is about time the government realizes that it can produce jobs directly, and it has to produce jobs directly, and it can do so if it wants to, and is serious about ensuring full employment by rolling out a robust public employment program. But the government refuses to do this. That's the point. The other part of the other missing point a big missing point in the Trabajo para sa Bayan programs, the fact that it has not been pushing for an industrial policy, nor has it been pushing for a clear solution to the deeper problems that has been holding back our economy. I already mentioned earlier the high cost of electricity. I mentioned the high cost of logistical cost in the country. These are things that needs reforms, proper reforms. But unfortunately, the government is not serious in addressing this. You mentioned earlier about decent work. Question is government doing something about decent work? I'm afraid not. No, as I said, the government has not been it has not done anything to make sure that security of tenure bill is once again taken up by Congress, so we can finally address this debilitating problem of contractualization. You see, the truth is we may have good labor laws in the country, but many of these laws are not accessible to many workers simply because they cannot exercise their right to organize, collectively bargain, and if needed, their right to go on strike. Now, why is that a problem? That's a problem because unless workers have the capacity to collectively defend themselves, then there's no way that they can assert their rights vis-a-vis their employers. So, if the government is serious about addressing decent work in the country, it would have to demonstrate seriousness in making sure that workers' rights and trade union rights are actually respected in the country. Unfortunately, government has not done this. In fact, there is a reason why the Philippines has always been in the ITUC's Global Rights Index list of top 10 worst countries in the world in terms of workers' rights. And that's because since the time of the previous administration, the administration which unleashed a deadly trade union repression, none of the policies that led to trade union repression have been corrected by the Marcos administration. And that makes them complicit to all the sins of the previous administration.
And then looking ahead, what should be the top priorities for job creation and skills development over the next decade? And as an addition, maybe since the latest data suggests many workers are leaving the job market entirely, how can we encourage Filipinos to rejoin the workforce?
As I said, I think it's about time that the government wakes up to the reality that it has to do something much more comprehensive. It can no longer leave the jobs generation, or it cannot solely rely on the private sector to generate jobs. It has to take on jobs generation directly by coming up with a robust public employment program. That's the first point. The second point, I think, is that we need an industrial policy that is backed up by a robust public investment program. Third, we have to take a look at, we have to really address structural reforms, including, for example, the need to reduce electricity, the need to address the worsening transportation crisis. And as you mentioned, we also have to address the worsening crisis of education in the country. Now, all this would require serious work, and it would requires commitment from a government that's really taking an activist mode in terms of the intervention in the economy. I'm afraid I'm not so sure if the Marcos administration fits the bill.
3 takeaways the Philippines needs from Joshua Mata: government intervention, a robust industrial policy, and structural reforms in electricity. That's all the time we have. Thank you for lending your expertise today, Centro Secretary General Joshua Mata. Before we go, some food for thought from former NEDA Director General Shelito Habito. A low unemployment rate can mask the real crisis, underemployment. It's not enough for people to work, they must be able to earn enough to live. And that's it for today's edition of Follow the Money. I am Su Jin Kim. Thanks for watching. Keep it here on BNC, the Bilyonaryo News Channel, always on top.